Hi, and welcome to IC Healer's YouTube presentation. I'm Mandy, the founder of IC Healer. IC Healer is an online clinic that serves to help educate folks with interstitial cystitis and bladder pain syndrome to help you identify your root cause and find healing opportunities so you can live the life you deserve. Now, if you're tuning in here, you're probably searching for answers like I was about 4 years ago. Now, this is where our speaker comes into play. In my darkest days of despair, and when I was first starting my career shift and educational path, I stumbled upon Dr. Ettinger. Now, he's been nothing but short of a blessing for me. Not only did he volunteer to give me his time, but he was my first mentor in functional medicine that really opened my eyes to the basics. I will never forget when he looked at my list of 20 or 30 supplements and cut them down by 75% and told me to stop chasing Lyme and to focus on my immune system. He's really one of the main contributors of shaping who I am today. Now, before we begin, I just want to remind you that the purpose of this presentation is for informational purposes and not intended to be a substitute for medical advice. Always seek the advice of your physician with any questions you have regarding a medical condition. So, in almost 32 years of clinical practice, Dr. Ettinger has had the privilege of treating over 25,000 patients around the world with just about every type of malady that can affect the body. He holds a degree in both chiropractic medicine and human biology with a focus on quantum biology and photobiomodulation therapy. Now, his hobbies and job are one of the same, researching how we interact with our universe and how to harness the information to improve human health and disease. Now, he's known for treating GI issues, mitochondrial dysfunction, autoimmune issues, SIBO, chronic fatigue syndrome, and many more. He's located in Orange, California, and you can reach him at advancedhealing10.com. Today, we have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Ettinger on some very interesting yet basic concepts in human health that I think you will find just fascinating. So without any more delay, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Marcus Ettinger.
Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate you having me, giving me the chance to be interviewed and share some of these basic concepts that really matter to getting the body well and keeping disease from manifesting inside the body.
Well, you know, one of the things I've noticed with you recently, especially, is you're a big fan of light and sunlight. So, and this is actually a really interesting concept to me. And actually, since watching some of your posts, I've been making more of an effort to be outside. We're in North Carolina, so we do have some good days and some bad days, but I have tried to make that effort, just seeing some of the things you've been posting. So I would love for you to explain to our audience how light fits into disease and health, especially natural sunlight, and how we can harness its power so we can become healthier.
You got it. So we have to go back 4 billion years ago. So 4 billion years ago, when the first single-celled organisms started taking shape, it was under the presence of light, primarily high-intensity UVB and UVA light. So that was the first beginning of what's called chronobiology. So we had the light and the dark cycle, the sun and the moon. So from the very, very beginning, there was circadian rhythm, okay? And from that ultraviolet light, we've created with water and air who we are today. So every single cell in the body has an eye. Every single process in the body relies on some type of light, whether it be UVA or B, infrared or visible light. So with the chronobiology, we just have to think logically. If we were created under light, and if we were created in that light and dark cycle, then why shouldn't we as human beings live in that light and dark cycle? But we don't. We defy the circadian rhythm. And there's a word, a German word called Zeitgeber. And Zeitgeber just means an external influence that affects the internal clocks of the body. So there's lots of Zeitgebers, which could be sleep and exercise and stress, but light is the number one Zeitgeber. So we spend 97% of our days indoors. Mm-hmm. So again, we're going against nature. And when we do spend our time indoors, we're only subjecting ourselves to one type of light, which would be the blue spectrum of light. Let's say 400 to 480 nanometer of light. Now we need that, but we need that at the right time of day, and we need that in conjunction with red light. So if we go outside, even on a cloudy, foggy day, 42% of that light is in the red spectrum. So in the morning, we should be waking up somewhere near dawn. And if we really wanted to dial in our body, we would go outside and we would witness every single sunrise of the day. And we would have that full spectrum light into our eyes, and we would initiate the daytime portion of our circadian rhythm. And then throughout the day, hopefully we would get some full spectrum light and not just immerse ourselves into the LED blue. And then at nighttime, we would, back when, as 55 years of age, I at least spent a lot of my life in incandescent 60-watt bulbs that still had some red and orange and yellow in the spectrum. Today, we have just blue LEDs. So hopefully, people would be able to experience their nighttime without making their brain think it's daytime by having LEDs on all the way up until 11 o'clock at night, which then affects that natural circadian rhythm. So what I try to do with my patients, just as far as this artificial light goes, is they could wear amber blue blockers to block out the blue at night after dusk. They could have, for instance, I have two full spectrum LED, two full spectrum infrared bulbs right above me right now, and the window's open. So I'm allowing natural light in. I have my red bulbs above me. I have an LED red light on the floor here. It's not on right now, but I have that on the floor. So I try to surround myself, if I am indoors, with a broad spectrum of red and blue light. And then the other thing about light is, if you look at any study for any particular condition, doesn't matter what symptom it is, skin, GI, mood, cancer, autoimmune, and you look at the study for vitamin D, every study you'll find I can't vouch for every study in the world, but just about every study I've ever read says that the people with the highest amount of vitamin D have the least amount of that particular condition. The people with the lowest amount of vitamin D have the highest incidence of autoimmunity, cancer, depression, anxiety, skin conditions, GI conditions, anything, arthritis, heart disease, anything you could think of. People at the equator, there's no multiple sclerosis at the equator. Now, is it just because they live at the equator? No, it's because they have the same amount of vitamin D production in December as they do in the summer, and a perfect circadian rhythm cycle, because the sun is vertical all year round. Mm-hmm. And then who has the highest amount of multiple sclerosis in the world? England and Ireland. Wow. Those countries with the least amount of vitamin D. And I have just some notes right here. There was just last year, in 2018, Swedish studies showed that all-cause mortality increased to the degree that you lack sun exposure. They say vitamin D, but you can't make vitamin D without the sun. So really, every study that says vitamin D helps that condition, or if you have low vitamin D, it can cause that condition, they should just remove the word D and just put in the word sun. But we just get in our head thinking of supplemental D, we need D, when really we should be talking about humans just need to be getting out in the sun more to build their D naturally.
That's interesting. But so okay, I like what you're saying about that. And does that take into consideration some of the different, obviously humans have moved around from where their geography, ancestry is. And, so the vitamin D metabolism does vary depending on where you're from. So how does that take into consideration, somebody who might have moved from the equator to maybe they moved to Canada? Does that also influence a lot of what you're talking about?
You're taking, if you take a person from where their genetics function optimally, into an area that their genetics have not been experiencing. So for instance, if they're used to the sun and you put them in the cold, or they're used to the cold and you put them in the sun, their genetics don't operate the same. Now you can acclimatize, there's an adaptation period, but the person who moves from the north to the south is going to do far better than the person that moves from the equator to Finland, Norway, England. So that person would need to buy, for instance, a Spirity Fiji vitamin A lamp, their D lamp, maybe some infrared bulbs, or an LED red light and near infrared light setup, just to try to mimic what they've moved away from. And even the people just living there would benefit from that as well.
So interesting. My ancestors are from the Persian area, so I almost wonder if that's why I have chronic low vitamin D. But so what are these bulbs that you're talking about? You mentioned bulbs, and where would we find them?
There's a company called Spirity, Sperti, and they make a UVA lamp called the Fiji. It's a red lamp. The color of the lamp itself is red, but it's a UVA bulb. So a tanning bulb that supplies a very narrow band of light from, let's say, 400 to about 480 nanometers. And then they have a UVB bulb that helps to create vitamin D in the system. So every day during the winter time, so just before our meeting today, I was at my office. I have a Juve quad light bank, which is the red and near infrared 660 and 850 nanometer lights. And then that's behind me, and then I'll rotate. Each day I'll do front one day, back one day. And then on the other side, I have the Spirity vitamin D lamp. And so I'll spend 5 minutes in front of that and 12 minutes in front of the red light bank. And then I'm also a surfer. So I'm at the beach, I'm outside as much as humanly possible, but during the winter time, per my D-Minder app, we're only making right now about 5 to 10 IUs of vitamin D a minute, and the window of D production, even in Southern California, at the 32nd parallel or latitude, is really, really low. So I need to keep my D up, and through those light devices, I can actually keep my D up around 100.
Wow.
Oh, yes. Now I start with about 15 inches away because it is UVB, but once you build up your solar callus, your adaptability to that, then I can actually get right in front of it and I don't get burnt. So the closer I get, the more D I'm going to make. Most people, now that's about, just to throw a price out there, $450. But for anybody living north of the 33rd parallel, especially Ohio, Michigan, Canada, northern parts of the United States, that is a great investment to have. And even to go back just to show the power of this, there was in the early parts of the 1900s, late 1800s, all the way up to about 1950s, Auguste Rollier in Switzerland had clinics that, now the clinics were, some of them were above 7,000 feet. And when you go above 7,000 feet, no matter what time of the year, you're still being able to be exposed to ultraviolet rays. So you get your UVB above 7,000 feet, even in Switzerland in December. Mm. And at one point in the mid 1900s, he had 3,000 people at around 14 clinics of his, and they had balconies with their gurneys. The beds were just pulled out onto the balconies, and they would wear they looked like diapers, and they would wear diapers, and they would just sit out in the sun all day. And the kids would just be wearing the same clothing, and they would have the desks outside on the grounds for their schooling, being exposed to sun. And now these are blonde-haired, blue-eyed Germans and Swedes with tans greater than I have today, but they were being exposed to sun all day long. And the conditions were primarily a form of tuberculosis that affected the skin, but a whole variety of conditions. And really, it was just light, air, clean air, good food, and exercise were used to treat these conditions to build up their D. And then once penicillin came into vogue, everybody disappeared from his clinics and they faded into obscurity. And it's really sad how, and he was the father of what's called heliotherapy, the use of sun in order to treat the human body. And now, could you imagine any hospital, any doctor recommending laying out in the sun all day for a particular condition? No, but OxyContin, penicillin, medication, statins, things like that are given out like candy.
Yeah. Very interesting. So you mentioned vitamin D at 100. So I want to just divert just for a second here. You know, the reference range, we always talk about the reference range versus the optimal range. 100 is, I mean, I would think if a medical doctor saw your vitamin D at 100, they would gawk at that. So what are your thoughts on that?
So the reference range, the cutoff low is around 30, and depending on which labs you're using, 28 to 32. If you look at the, let's say, the Ethiopian nomadic tribes, their D on average would be from around 40, let's say at the low, all the way up to 90 to 100. So really, if we were out in the sun all day, let's say our ancestors who were just wearing shorts, their D would be 60, 70, 80, 90. Now, is supplemental D is completely different than the D you get from the sun. When we make the UVB through the epidermis of the skin, it's sulfated. When you take the vitamin D orally, that vitamin D is not sulfated. So certain things like vitamin B12, iron, fish oil, and D don't work the same supplementally as they would from nature. So certain things need to be activated by light. And just to go on that for a second, if you look at the basic chemistry, there are 4 amino acids that are called aromatic amino acids: tyrosine, tryptophan, histidine, and phenylalanine. And if you look at their chemical structure, they have a benzene ring. And now that benzene ring traps photonic energy. Now, what does those amino acids make? Dopamine, melatonin, serotonin, epinephrine, histamine. Those things are then activated by light. So we make our serotonin, which is the precursor to melatonin, and we make our dopamine when that light hits our eyes first thing in the morning. And the neatest thing is all of this is a big circle. It just is a big circle. So if you talk about one thing, you could build a circle around it. So for instance, when the ultraviolet light hits the eye, it actually can create, UVB can create inflammation at the iris and cornea. Indirectly, that produces nitric oxide. That goes through a chain of neurons that stimulate melatonin secreting hormone, which then releases melatonin in the skin. So indirectly, by having inflammation of the eye from being at the beach, having UVB in our eye, indirectly, we make melatonin in our body. So light has an effect on every single reaction of our body. When we have UVB light on our skin, it modulates our microbiome. So indirectly, that UVB it does not penetrate deeply, but indirectly, it modulates the diversity of the microbiome.
Wow.
And when I share with my patients, so if we think of either creation or evolution, whatever a person believes in, we still are who we are today. Why would evolution or God put photoreceptors, things called chromophores, proteins that pick up light, on every single surface area of our body? Our subcutaneous fat, the epidermis, the inside wall of the arterioles, the melanin, the eye, the testicles, around every single surface area of the body. So why would we have a photoreceptor or these aromatic amino acids that trap light, and the metals that are the centers of certain enzymes, okay, especially in the mitochondria. Why would we have all of these things that grab onto light if we weren't meant to be naked 24 hours a day, 365 days a year in the sun?
Wow.
But we wear clothes, sunblock, we're indoors 97% of the day. We have only one narrow band of wavelengths of light to shower us all day long. And then to throw another thing into the mix, we surround ourselves with electromagnetic frequencies, which are just a wider band of energy, millimeter waves of energy with Wi-Fi and EMF. So really, we're defying nature, and we're surrounding ourselves with technology. And the further we move away from nature and the sun and the circadian rhythm and adopt the laws of man, which is technology, we wonder why we're so overweight, diseased, depressed, in pain, inflamed. And the answer is just logic. It's not the food we put into our mouth, it's we have moved away from nature. Why did our grandparents or even our parents get away with eating ice cream and bread and sugar and Coca-Cola and smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and not have the amount of disease we have? They did not have the amount of disease we have today, but they had incandescent 60-watt bulbs, typed on a typewriter, had no cell phones, were outside more. And today we're just connected to technology, and those same foods that we could have gotten away with eating, let's say in the 60s and 70s and 50s, we can't today because of the amount of irritation and inflammation generated by the artificial light and the non-native EMF. It's crazy.
Wow, that is really, really, really fascinating. I mean, you've just really opened, I think, everybody's eyes here to, because we are, a lot of us are, really hyper focused on what we're putting in our mouths.
Right.
The whole, I mean, I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day about their sister actually just died of breast cancer, and she was like 100% organic. She was exercising. And so they were confused as to why she still, passed away from cancer. And so like a lot of what you're saying is making a lot of sense. So I really appreciate that. And we definitely have to, I'm going to put a link down below on my page on some of this light that you're talking about, just so people have access to it. So I'll definitely put that link. So we'll share that after this session. So thank you so much. So
you're welcome.
Now, this really ties into another topic that I'm extremely fascinated with myself. Actually, interesting, the story goes with me was I started taking, I took a genetics class in my graduate studies. And I was always, when I was in my undergrad, I took genetics, and I was always fearful of it. For whatever reason, I thought it was scary. It was like, it's too much science. And so when I went into my graduate studies and did the genetics class, we learned about epigenetics. And I was like, oh my God, this is really cool. And then in my doctorate, we did a full semester on genetics and epigenetics. And so we kind of got into, I'm doing a mentorship program with 3x4 Genetics, and we're doing some testing, and I'm going to be mentoring in the United States. So epigenetics is really huge on my mind. And I know that it kind of ties into what we're talking about, but it's also, for the listener, it's a very new topic, and I think a little overwhelming. Whenever I bring up genetics, people kind of, their eyes start to roll behind their head. Like, what is she talking about? So I want to talk about genetics and epigenetics, but in a way that, the listener can understand, the layman can understand.
Okay.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
Right. So first let's define terms. Genes there's two sets of genes. There is our genes that are located in nuclear genome, in the nucleus of the cell, and then there's mitochondrial DNA or genes. So we inherit our mitochondrial DNA from our mothers. And then the genetic DNA, theoretically, let's say if it were linear, 50% from your mother, 50% from your father. Genes are like a blueprint. If I go to an architect and I ask them, can you draw me up a blueprint to build a house? Those are your genes. Now, Some genes are etched in stone. The color of our eyes, the color of our hair, male or female. Those are etched in stone. The rest can be turned on or off. Okay, they can be upregulated or downregulated. And those things need to be built. So for instance, the blueprint cannot build itself. Your genetics can't activate themselves. They need something to get them going. All right. And those are epigenetics, things that are above above your genes. So now you get a construction crew and the plumbers and everybody, electricians, and they go in and they build the house. Those are the epigenetic factors. So epigenetics is basically everything. The light you're exposed to or not exposed to, how you eat or don't eat, exercise or don't exercise, how you sleep or don't sleep, interference on the nervous system, and thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. Now, my focus is, and what I believe in my heart, is that our mood, the thought, and there's a great book if people are interested, and a lot of people I'm sure have heard of this, Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. He's an epigeneticist, cellular biologist, one of my first mentors back in the early 2000s, and he wrote his book, I think it was 2004 or 5, Biology of Belief, that your beliefs affect your biology, and thoughts, emotions, and perceptions affect your biology. So if you surround yourself or you live in a chronic state of shame, blame, regret, anxiety, fear, depression, epigenetically, that upregulates or turns on bad genes or inflammatory genes and can suppress anti-inflammatory processes in the body. And as we know, just about every disease there is, its genesis comes from inflammation. So if we can, through whatever process, keep inflammation low, then theoretically disease won't affect us.
Inflammation, that's where that was derived.
Inflammation, correct. And so then the opposite of those emotions would be love and gratitude. So if we surround ourselves with love, joy, happiness, gratitude, epigenetically, that gets the serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin, all super powerful antioxidant, anti-inflammatory neurotransmitters, rather than living in a constant state of epinephrine or adrenaline, just when your body's in the fight flight response 24 hours a day. If your body thinks a tiger is chasing it 24 hours a day, how long before it just wants to give up? But if you can move from the sympathetic dominant state, fight flight, and then move readily into the parasympathetic at night, so that's again the circadian rhythm. We should be slightly sympathetic dominant during the day, more parasympathetic at night, and that would be a perfect circadian rhythm. And that's somebody who has a control over their fears and anxieties and things like that. So in my practice, I refer to YouTube videos, books, things like that, because it's the one thing as a doctor, no doctor could just say, Mandy, you don't, why should you worry about that? You shouldn't worry. It doesn't work that way. That's something that we have to try to control on our own through education, counseling, talk therapy, whatever it's going to be for that individual. They have to discover how to control their own state of existence. And another book that I love is Ryan Holiday's, with one L, Ryan Holiday's The Daily Stoic. And I was named after Marcus Aurelius, the last great Stoic and Roman emperor, and his mentor Epictetus, I'm going to paraphrase here, said there's only one thing in the universe that you have absolute control over, and that is choice. And then his follow-up was, then why do we spend the majority of our life worrying about everything that's outside of our control? So through that book, if we could train ourselves to stop worrying about the problem and start focusing on our choice, there's less anxiety when all you have to do is worry about choice. Am I going to have the chicken or am I going to have the steak? Am I going to turn right or left? Am I going to enter into that contract or not into that contract? Rather than, oh my God, what if, and build up that anxiety, because that's not that's the problem. Let's focus on the choice. And so the Daily Stoic helps you with just a couple paragraphs a day to educate ourselves and to become more at cause over making choices. And then Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief gives us kind of the anatomy behind how the emotions affect our genes and how epigenetics can control our turning on good and bad genes. The other thing is, if we can bring back into our lives, one thing I just try to do with my patients is just use a lot of logic and analytical thought. Why did we do certain things as kids and we stop them as adults? Riding bikes, skateboard, going to the beach, having fun, hanging out with our friends.
Pickling.
Yeah. Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Why is it? And if you look at a kid, has no worry in the world. Mm-hmm. And then as we get older, mm-hmm. we take on more responsibilities in a job, and we become very solid, and anxiety becomes more into our lives. And it's not because life is more stressful. It's just because we forget how to have that love and the gratitude and the fun in our lives. And so I just try to share with my patients, bring back the things you did as a kid. You don't have to go to the gym and pump weights for 2 hours a day. Go back to riding a bike, walk on the beach, get outside more, have fun, take your wife on a date, take your husband on a date, go on a vacation. People in America are fearful of going on a vacation. They fear that if they go on a vacation, when they come back, they're going to have double the work.
Yeah.
So workers today don't even leave. They have paid vacations, and they don't even take their paid vacations. We're creating our own problems, So looking for the pills for the solutions, or looking for miracles for solutions. The solutions is just, they've always been there. We just have to go back to them. And it always goes back to nature. Sun, outdoors, barefoot, feet on the ground, breathing clean air, having a good time, taking your shirt off, or wearing a bikini. Things like that bring health. And when we get into the laws of man or technology, we fall apart as human beings, because we're not designed genetically to live in that environment. We're designed genetically to live in nature. So that's where the epigenetics and genetics come in, is just and then as a chiropractor, just to touch on that and the interference on the nervous system, acupuncture, massage, and chiropractic. So any type of trauma, playing sports, contact sports, whiplash injuries, scoliosis, childbirth, anything that is going to affect the musculoskeletal system and putting interference on the nervous system is an epigenetic influence that a lot of people neglect. And so we can't separate one from the whole. So again, getting proper sleep, going to bed, let's say, I like 10. I think 10 is a great time for people to go to bed. 11 at the very, very latest, but I think 10 is better. Waking up at dawn or just before dawn, getting some degree of exercise, especially weight-bearing exercise for stimulating mitochondrial density, eating well. Mm-hmm. And again, whether they could afford organics or not organics, just making sure that you get your proteins, healthy fats, you stay away from anything processed, the bad seed oil, inflammatory seed oils. You just eat as good a clean diet as you can. And again, if you can't afford whole foods, you don't have to eat whole foods. Just don't eat the boxed and the canned and the manipulated foods. And then the thoughts and emotions and perceptions. Just doing something to educate yourself, to try to dial that in a little bit, because nothing will kill you faster. I don't care if you went to a chiropractor every day, ate a whole foods diet, slept 8 hours a day, went to the gym. If you lived in a constant state of anxiety, shame, blame, or regret, none of those things in my mind matter, because you will knock your body down faster by having those negative thoughts than we can build up through good food, supplementation, exercise, sleep, and getting acupuncture and chiropractic. So to me, that is very, very, very important.
Wow. I hope everyone heard that. We deal a lot with that with the IC population. And that's one of the reasons I brought in a life coach in to IC Healer. I realized that there was a need for a lot of this. I believe also that just like we exercise our body, we have to exercise our brain. And I do believe you can train your brain to think more positively. Just like exercise, it gets easier and becomes a habit. I personally have come from a, more of a negative reinforcement family background. And, I think it's cultural for us. And I think that for me, it has taken time, but the more I think about surround myself with positive energy, the more it's become part of my lifestyle.
Right.
So, thank you. That was really, really informative. And I definitely want to elaborate more on that with our group coaching folks. So let's tie that now into mitochondrial. So we're kind of going back because you did mention mitochondrial density. And I know mitochondrial is a real hot topic these days. Everyone's talking about it, mitochondrial dysfunction, ATP, energy. So let's move on to that. So tell us what you know about that.
Okay. No, the mitochondria is, everything boils down to the mitochondria. So disease boils down to mitochondrial function, all right? Food is just the substrate. So let's just say proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Those are just the substrates that the mitochondria will use to produce energy. So even if you were eating chicken nuggets, it still is going to supply the mitochondria with hydrogens and electrons in order to function. Okay, some foods supply more than others. So, for instance, DHA, 22 carbon molecule, has the ability to produce per mole, per unit of energy, let's say, 148 148 ATP.
What was that you mentioned?
So DHA from fish oil.
DHA from fish oil. Okay.
Because of its structure, by the time the mitochondria could fully utilize it, it has the ability to make 148 ATP, where carbohydrates, starches, glucose can make 36 ATP. So again, when I look at logic, I go, okay, wouldn't I be better off having fats, which can produce 120 to 148 ATP, great fats, rather than, or at least have those fats in my diet to have the ability to produce more energy than just, let's say, a carb dominant diet where I'm only going to produce 36, okay? Now, once we get into the mitochondrial function, we're looking at a couple things: mitochondrial function and mitochondrial density. So one, we got to give the mitochondria exactly what it needs. One, it needs light. Okay. So when we look at light, here's the thing. Doug Wallace, he is a amazing doctor, created or coined the term easy water, exclusion zone water. And that is water that infrared light could make at surfaces. So within the mitochondria, we can have this exclusion zone inside a cell, inside the mitochondria, where at the surface, you have this negatively charged water that can keep away virus, bacteria, yeast, fungus. It's basically like a no man's land and excludes things from getting into this area. We make that through light. So things work better if they have less irritation to them. So if we could keep things out, they're going to function better. So we get that from infrared light, which is basically heat. And then within the mitochondria itself, through red light, so near infrared light, there is water inside of the mitochondria. So there's a little guy, there's 5 guys inside a mitochondria. The number 5 guy is where ATP is made. The number 4 guy makes tons of water, okay? And that water, we call it matrix water. Well, the water could be thick or the water could be thin. So the thinner that water is, because we're exposed to light, specifically near infrared light, which we get from the sun, or you can get near infrared light banks like the Joovv, Joovv, decreases the viscosity of that water. Now, if I could decrease the viscosity of that water, the number 5 guy is like this little windmill, just spinning around, cranking out ATP. Well, if the viscosity of the water is lower, there's less resistance to that little windmill, and he could spit out ATP more efficiently. So again, one way to create mitochondrial efficiency would be decrease the viscosity of mitochondrial water. But how do we do that? Not being indoors, being outdoors in light, not covering yourself up with sunblock, and not wearing a ton of clothes, okay? So that's one way. The other way is through exercise. So if we're a sloth does not need, or if we act as a sloth, we don't need very much energy production because we're not doing anything. So if we want to increase mitochondrial efficiency, we've got to make our body move, and that muscle contraction and motion requires ATP production. So the motors are running, okay? And they're more efficient by running them more often, okay? Other thing is we need certain nutrients. So for instance, coenzyme Q10 is an electron donor. So the mitochondria works off hydrogens and electrons. And so through the number 1 guy going to the number 2 guy to the number 3 guy, it's coenzyme Q10. And so that could either be done, the version of coenzyme Q10 I like is called ubiquinol with an OL at the end. So that helps to supply, just an electron donor, supplies the electrons back to give us a nice pool of energy for the mitochondria to run. And there's certain things that can inhibit that coenzyme Q10, or these little guys inside the mitochondria called cytochromes. So the number 1 guy and the number 3 guy could be broken down by statin medications. So statin medications inhibit that coenzyme Q10 production. So now we don't have a proper amount of that electron donor inside the mitochondria. And then one thing that most doctors don't have background in biochem like I do. And so for instance, let's say through breast cancer, they want to prescribe, so think of how many people are on statins. So now around the world, statins is decreasing mitochondrial function. Another thing that decreases mitochondrial function, tamoxifen. So tamoxifen could break the number 3 guy. So now you break the number 3 guy.
Is that a breast cancer drug?
Breast cancer drug.
Okay.
So, a really popular breast cancer drug, and women are on that for 5 years after chemo. So now, what is cancer? It's a mitochondrial disease. So now I'm giving a woman chemo and radiation, which destroy the mitochondria, and then I'm giving them a drug for 5 years after the therapy that affects the mitochondria. Am I helping that person or hurting that person? I'm hurting that person. Okay, so through supplying the body with good electron donors, good substrates, making sure that we're out in the sun, decreasing the viscosity of that mitochondrial water, theoretically, we have proper mitochondrial functioning. And because we lose, now this would be linear, not quantum, so we do not lose 10% of mitochondrial per decade. So for instance, 0 to age 100, and if you lose 10% per decade, you die at age 100. You can age 7 years for every 1 year of life, or 1 year for every 7 years of life, and keep great mitochondrial density. But the more mitochondria we lose and the weaker they are, they can't recognize when cells become weak or dying and self-destruct as well as they should. And that's where cancer develops, rather than recognizing, hey, the cell is not functioning properly, let's self-destruct.
Apoptosis.
Apoptosis, they stay, and then they can mutate and form a cancer or just a very weak body. So we have to keep the efficiency of the mitochondria there. And then we also, to take the place of what we lose, is mitochondrial density. So would you rather have a 4-cylinder car, or would you rather have a 16-cylinder Bugatti Veyron or 12-cylinder Ferrari? I'd rather have a 12-cylinder Ferrari. And as we lose these cylinders, or losing the mitochondrial density, we don't function as well. We don't have as much horsepower to get our body to go. So mitochondrial density really is two things. One, amazing guy, Wim Hof, the Iceman with cold thermogenesis. People could look him up on YouTube. Holds, I think, 26 or so Guinness Book World Records, immersing himself in ice up to his neck and running marathons in freezing weather, wearing his Tevas and shorts, and hiking up Mount Kilimanjaro with his Tevas on and shorts in freezing weather.
Right.
I mean, the guy's amazing.
Yeah.
But his mitochondrial density, because immersing himself into the cold, you'll have to kill that guy with a bullet. And now he's not eating a whole foods, organic, vegan diet, living the most pristine life. But because of his mitochondrial density, he's able to get away with a lot more.
From cold immersion?
Cold immersion.
Wow.
So minimally 55-degree water, but a person could just start off with head dunks, putting their head.
Or contrast showers? I mean, would that be beneficial? Contrast showers?
Contrast showers would be a good start. And then if they could find a cold body of water, or ice packs, there's, I think it's coolfit.com sells an ice vest, which would be a good start.
Okay.
But I have patients who live in northerly climates, and one of them just sent me a picture of her and her two girlfriends in 40-degree water up in Idaho, doing the cold thermogenesis. Now there you do just 2 to 5 minutes, but that increases the brown fat, which is metabolically active, heavy in mitochondria, where our white adipose tissue does not have any mitochondria. The brown fat have a ton. And if you can build up a density of brown fat, you build up your density of mitochondria. And then the other would be weight-bearing exercise. So there's what's called Wolff's Law, and then I've adapted it for the whole body. So Wolff's Law, paraphrasing, says bone remodels according to the stress placed upon it. But really, our body, every cell, every mechanism adapts to the stress placed upon it. Electromagnetically, gravitationally, chemically, physically, emotionally. So everything we've done or not done our entire life is who we are today. So if we can push heavy weight with big muscle groups, the glutes, the quads, hamstrings, calves, there's more mitochondria in those areas than a tiny bicep or my forearm. Now we still want to work those areas out, but if I can push through squats, we're going to build up mitochondrial density. So you can't build a big bicep without building legs. So you do your legs, and then by working the bicep out, you're going to build a bigger bicep. So we build our mitochondrial density through cold thermogenesis and through weight-bearing exercise. So to hedge our bets, light, insurance policy, a little coenzyme Q10, and build the density up through weight-bearing exercise and cold thermogenesis. It's simple techniques that go a long way to keep a body healthy. But at the end of the day, the light that we surround ourselves with is the most important, what's called Zeitgeber, that there is. So I'm going to take thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, and I'm going to take my light environment as the top 2 things. And then number 3 is even way down the list, which would be food. So if I can control my emotions and I could control my light, theoretically, I'm 98% ahead of the game, and as far as keeping disease away. And if I needed to heal myself, so if I had a patient coming to me with cancer, AIDS, asthma, allergies, autoimmune diseases, the first thing I'm going to do is really try to dial in that thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. And if I can, they're moving to the Riviera Maya, they're moving to Costa Rica, they're moving to Ecuador, some place where they could get closer to the equator and get their light habits dialed in. Okay.
So, this seems like a lot of this is tying back to light therapy. And I feel like this is something that people can start doing today. I mean, they can literally start working towards that. And a lot of people listening, I'm sure that, I know I'm from New Jersey originally, and, there's several months of the year, it's, 20 degrees, and it's more difficult to conceptualize that we have to be spending all this time outdoors, but also people work from home. So they work in an office environment. They're not able to go outside. So what can you recommend that people can do that's realistic to help start this process?
Okay. First, natural light is always the best. So if it were a perfect world, we would get up first thing in the morning, you would walk outside your house, you would face east, rain, snow, cloudy, sunny day, makes no difference. And you would point your face in the direction of the sun towards the east. So 42% of the light during the day is red. About 600 nanometers to 1,000,000 nanometers. Okay, that's a lot of light. So a lot of infrared, near infrared, and red light is the visible light outside. Now, just real quick, we don't see light, we perceive brightness. So people think because it's dark, there's no light. I mean, in the morning, if it's foggy or cloudy or snowy, we perceive brightness. We don't see ultraviolet light. We don't see infrared light when we're outside. We perceive brightness. So really, we just have to understand that light is there. We just need to go outside. Now that starts our day. It starts our circadian rhythm. It puts that light in the eyes and builds up our serotonin, our melatonin, and dopamine, and gets our body going. So we build our melatonin stores in the morning. And then dark activates the release of it at night. So we need to be outside in the morning, just for a little bit. So if it were a perfect world, everyone would get up, they'd go outside, they'd point their face towards the east, and they would see the sunrise.
How long do you recommend?
Any is better than none. So
Okay.
if they could do it for 5-10 minutes, that would be fantastic. Bring your coffee out, your tea out in the morning, or just stand out there in the morning would be amazing.
Great.
Okay. Any is better than none. 5 days a week is better than no days a week. 5 minutes is better than no minutes, okay?
Gotcha.
Then during the day, hopefully, if they're working a 40-hour work week and they're working in an office, they take 10 minutes during lunch, their 10-minute breaks, and they go outside, and if they could take their shirt off or roll up their sleeves or have a tank top on, something just to get some midday sun, just to allow some red into their eyes, so they're not subjecting themselves to that narrow band of blue all day long. And we didn't spend time on blue, but just take my word for it. Exposing ourselves to blue is not good. Okay, you can't take a piece from the whole and think the body is going to operate well. And blue is the worst spectrum to be exposed to chronically. We need it. That's the light first thing in the morning that gets us going, but it's balanced with red. So if you're going to work indoors, just wear a long sleeve. Because remember, we have photoreceptors. Keep the least amount of those photoreceptors being irritated by blue, the pure blue. Mm-hmm. So just wear a long sleeve. You could wear indoor yellow blue blockers during the day, and then you would switch to your ambers at nighttime. So that would be your indoor light habits. And then at nighttime, try to keep the blue exposure down, again, with either 60-watt incandescent bulbs, candlelight. I have some very dim soft white rope lighting that almost looks like a candle in the room at night. It's very faint, just to give, there's a little light, but so I'm not subjecting myself to the blue. And then now that would be our natural indoor lighting. Then as far as machinery goes, there's 4 things. A person, now, if it were a perfect world and we all had the money, clear light, far infrared sauna. So now that's your far infrared light. Clear light, far infrared saunas are amazing as far as now that's light. Even though it's heat, it's still light. And that decreases the viscosity of that mitochondrial water, helps with detoxification, stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system.
Can you explain that real quick, the parasympathetic, just real quick to the...
Parasympathetic is our rest and digest nervous system. It's the vagus nerve. And the better the vagal nerve tone, the better response the information from the inside of our body goes to the brain, and the brain can communicate to the body. So our body just has better response mechanisms. It just responds more efficiently, more effectively, and that affects everything internally: digestion, bowel habits, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, heart, lung function, adrenal, kidney, vagal tone. So if we have great parasympathetic tone, again, theoretically, our body should operate really, really well. And the far infrared sauna can help with that. Then we have near infrared light devices. Again, these would be sun substitutes if a person really wanted to have all the bells and whistles. Now, again, these cost some money. So the near infrared and red light banks would be a substitute for a person who just, they work 40 hours a week, live in the 52nd floor of a apartment building, New York City, work indoors all day, and for whatever reason they can't get sun. I don't want to call it the next best thing, but it's really the next best thing. So they could at least have some of that. And then there's far infrared bulbs people can buy. And then there's the company Sperti, S-P-E-R-T-I, that sells a vitamin D lamp, $450. And if they use, when we put a link on, hopefully we use Ettinger, E-T-T-I-N-G-E-R 10, and they could get a 10% discount.
Perfect.
You stand 5 minutes a day. If they recommend 5 minutes every other day, I think 5 minutes a day would be amazing. And they stand in front of that, and they're going to get the ultraviolet B on their skin and manufacture vitamin D. And then we also need ultraviolet A. They can buy for, I think it's $350, their Fiji ultraviolet A lamp and get vitamin A. Now, this would be for the person that has the money. If they only could buy one thing, they spend the money, the $450 or $405 with the discount, and they buy a vitamin D lamp. Because again, everything, every disease, every symptom that you could possibly think of reduces to the degree our vitamin D is up. Okay, so we heal faster and have less chance of disease the greater our vitamin D level is. So that would be, and again, it does not, iron, B12, fish oil, and D do not work exactly the same as if we were to eat fish, eat beef, the heme iron and the B12 from the beef, and so the D, the fish oil, the B12.
Well, wild fish.
Wild fish would be the best. So when we get the D naturally, it just works more efficiently in the body. Just to go off the topic for a second, I've run literally over 10,000 labs pre and post on people and people around the world. And I've seen D levels, high B12 levels, and high iron levels from supplementation, but physiologically, they don't get the benefit. I see people still with peripheral neuropathies. I have people with all osteoporosis, and people with have the exact same symptoms of anemia, even though on paper their levels look great, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't translate physiologically. So just because on paper it looks good does not mean physiologically their body's going to reap the benefits for it. So again, as much as we could get back to nature and not live in the law of man, our body operates effectively. So it's just, anytime we want to do something, just think, is there a way I could do it naturally? Grounding pad, no, go outside and go barefoot. Light, just go outside. Supplements, is there a food source, go back to the food source. Exercise, do you need a machine or could you do it on your own? Whatever it may be, if there's a natural way to do it, it's always going to be better to do it naturally than it would be to do it technologically.
Yeah, as a fitness instructor, I can go on and on about exercise, but it's one of
Yes.
the things I'll tell my clients. That's one of the things that's actually difficult for them initially because of all the pain that they have. But we start really small, 1 minute, 2 minutes, metabolic tipping point. But I want to mention about the vitamin D. There is an association with anti-proliferative factor in the bladder and low vitamin D levels.
Right.
So there's your IC association right there, because people with IC tend to have this APF. And it's a marker you can actually test for, and it'll give you some clues as if there's an association. And then a lot of people, and it's just basically your healing mechanisms in your bladder are impaired with the anti-proliferative factor.
Yeah, and if we look at even the big picture of things, you can't ever separate a piece from the whole. So if I'm out in the sun and I'm stimulating nitric oxide production, which is a signaling molecule, which is a peripheral vasodilator, and I'm stimulating melatonin, and I'm stimulating neurotransmitters, and the stimulation of the light on the adipose tissue, the fat, releasing the hormone leptin, which helps with satiety and the ability of the body to burn fat. And I'm making the D, and I'm working on, and it's stimulating my microbiome. You're literally working on every single processes of the entire body with one thing. So the greatest supplement on the planet is just being out in natural light, because that one supplement affects every cell and every mechanism, directly or indirectly, in the entire body. So we get into a habit of looking at pieces, the pancreas for diabetes or the heart for congestive heart disease. Well, if I read you every congestive heart disease, I know we're getting off the topic, but I just even printed this just to show these are the symptoms per PubMed or the Merck manual for congestive heart disease: shortness of breath, fatigue and weakness, swelling, rapid irregular heartbeat, reduced ability to exercise, persistent cough, increased need to urinate at night, swelling of the abdomen, very rapid weight gain, lack of appetite, nausea, difficulty concentrating or decreased alertness, sudden severe shortness of breath. Every single one of those symptoms is the exact symptom of mitochondrial failure. Is congestive heart disease a heart disease? Or where's the highest amount of mitochondrial density in the entire body? Brain, central nervous system, heart, and liver. It's a mitochondrial disease. What's one of the best treatments? Getting that person out into the light. So again, no matter what we talk about, a woman's bladder, go naked out in the sun and get all of those photoreceptors on the body in the light. Yes, you have to treat it from what you and I do. Yes, we have to treat it acutely to get a person, triage, get a person out of the woods. But at the same time, rebuild their body. So hopefully we do this acute phase treatment. So for any doctors or functional medicine coaches and things listening, we do an acute phase treatment. Get them out of the woods, get them out of pain, get them at least feeling good. But then long term, you got to treat the underlying why. And what's the underlying why? Were they sensitive to the salicylates and oxalates they were eating? They developed that sensitivity, but why did they develop that sensitivity? Their microbiome short-circuiting, their inflammation in their body, the low vitamin D. Why? Living in technology, EMF, artificial light, not having fun, anxiety, depression. Everything goes back everything ties in together. So no matter what the disease is, what I try to do in my practice is stabilize the patient, but then handle the underlying why. And the underlying why for just about everybody is about the same, short of going to the Amazon and picking up a parasite, or,
Right.
you know, acutely drinking water with arsenic from a tainted well or something. You know, there's those things, but besides those things, most people's genesis of disease or symptom is the same. It's just what acute therapy that we do that is different.
Right. You know, right after we're done, I'm going to order that vitamin D lamp. Definitely. I'm going to put the link down there.
Okay.
So would it be safe to say for someone starting off and listening to this, really, just to kind of recap, outdoors twice a day,
Yes.
get that get photoreceptors stimulated,
Yes.
minimal clothing if possible. Now, some of us can't go outside naked. You know, we have neighbors and we might be in jail if we did that. But, you know, minimal clothing when possible, short period of time, 5 to 10 minutes is plenty to start. If you can invest anything, go ahead and invest in the vitamin D device.
Sure.
For sure, because now we know it's tied to so many things, including your bladder health.
Yes.
Exercise, but do things that you actually enjoy. Don't just force yourself to go to the gym because we say so. We should, you know, if you enjoy running or outside or playing with your kids, that's more important.
Right.
And anything else that I miss here?
I think that is pretty, and hopefully the book, The Daily Stoic, and either the YouTube videos of Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief, his original video that I think is 2012. But if somebody just got those two things, and just to get on, just one last thing on that, affirmations.
Yes.
We could say it. We could say, I'm going to be a good dad. We could say, I'm going to try my hardest to not be anxious. I'm going to live in love and gratitude. But if you don't put it on paper and you don't read it daily over and over again, I am a fantastic person. I have the incredible ability to heal. I will heal from this condition. I am an amazing person. Whatever the affirmation is, if it's not on paper and the person is not reading it, it doesn't have the same power. And you can change your thought patterns, neurolinguistic programming. You could change your thought patterns. We could stop sabotaging ourselves subconsciously by putting on a piece of paper, my life is not a problem, rather than always saying, well, the problem with that is, or you don't understand. Those are your affirmations that keep the diseases going, or my interstitial cystitis, or my bladder is acting up today. You're owning that condition. So you say, I am not my disease. I'm a spiritual being. I'm a 16-year-old kid who in my mind is the healthiest human being on the planet. And you read that every day, and then you become that thing. And if you don't do it, and you just think it, oh, I think I'm going to get better. No, I know I'm going to get better. And you write that down. That's medicine right there as well.
Wow. Achieve and you will believe. That's why we say that.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. This was so good. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link. I'm going to put Dr. Ettinger's link to his website as well. So if you want to contact him, you may do that. He has, you have an online clinic as well?
Yes.
Great. So he serves people all over the world. So you may reach out to him. I'm going to put the link for the vitamin D device. And I'll put the links for the books that you mentioned as well, so you can access them. And this was really great. I'm really looking forward to posting this. I really appreciate your time. And I hope everyone listening understands that it doesn't have to be complicated. These are very basic, simple principles of health that if you can start to implement, you should start seeing some dramatic changes in your health.
Well, thank you, Mandy. I'm very grateful for you having me on today and being able to share things I've learned over all these years.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandy. Take care.
Take care.